Hi, welcome to our next world and an analysis of the TV series Sliders. Hennessy is outside catching all the money that one guy is literally throwing away in celebration, so they're not going to be able to talk this time. To begin with, here's Koki to talk about the world potential alternate history, though. Koki?
So, this time, Quinn and friends have found themselves in a world where massive amount of oil was discovered under San Francisco, giving many people mineral rights. It seems to be distributed regardless as to whether or not you actually owned properties. It seems to be distributed pretty equitably. That being said, some people were definitely making more money than others. Quinn himself is actually over the mother lode, and everyone's just kind of celebrating. Presumably, they're going to have to move as all of this oil drilling happens, but I think it's worth noting that there were some technological innovations in the 90s that allowed for greater oil extraction, usually for already used oil wells that appeared to be dry. 3D modeling, seismic modeling allowed people to find greater amounts of oil. That being said, it could have renewed interest into searching other parts of California that weren't searched before, and in this timeline, there's oil under San Francisco.
As for things of potential political mention in here, there's a couple of things I found of interest. First, and most obviously, is the graffiti they encountered just before they slide off the world that says, "Greed is sexy," with a $sign for the capital S in sexy. This could be interpreted as a mild condemnation of getting money for the sake of it, and likewise a condemnation of the rich, as such because the word greed is generally viewed as a negative, characteristic of those who are cold or stingy, general trait of the unvirtuous. A less morally negative version of this would be to talk about like frugality, but it's the difference between saving what you get in case of frugality and wanting it unnecessarily at the expense of others and for its own sake, for greed. To talk about greed being sexy is to note a character flaw in your society in which that's seen as sexy is also that which is considered at best a morally problematic issue and at worst just wholly immoral. It's less about engaging with the world for the sake of helping others and more just for the sake of having all the money for oneself as a desired extreme. But I guess one could ask, are not all humans inherently selfish or greedy? But that's just blatantly not true, as we have evidence from prehistoric times even that people take care of others and give even to the most unproductive of their group, tribe, clan, what have you, even in excess of what the person needs. There's at least one case where a person likely developed diabetes due to how much they were being pampered when they couldn't take care of themselves. People are, and always have been, by our very nature, which is to say eusocial, helpful, caring, and benevolent. It's our culture that makes us greedy and selfish. We have to learn to stop caring and helping. Therefore, by extension, we can also unlearn that and stop transmitting it as a cultural value. Additionally, there's another thing to point to that Koki actually brought up to me earlier in part of the episode, is also a damning criticism of any supposed meritocracy people claim we live in. It could also be a damning criticism of the idea that the wealthy did anything to actually earn it. In this world, a lot of people in San Francisco have become rich. Not everybody, and definitely not the entire world. I feel like Wade's just using hyperbole when she says there's oil everywhere and everybody's rich, to quickly and easily describe the change of San Francisco without, understandably, going into the nuances. The rich didn't actually make anything or do much, if any, work for the money that they're getting. They just got it through exploitation. In this case, it's exploitation of the land that they merely happened to luck upon. It did literally nothing to earn through work or merit. Here, the society, cultural, economic, whatever system is not meritocratic, just lucky that it formed as it did and found those deposits. They might put them to good use, they might mishandle them. A meritocracy would encourage open use in a world system or a nation, in the case of a starting up meritocratic society, by a person who has the best use for them based off of what the person's merits are. On the individual level, it's just sheer luck that Q-Ball is a millionaire and not his neighbor, and he gets nothing. In both cases, meritocracy is suggested as like a farce. That leads me to the last thing that I had written down. Q-Ball is basically like a Mary Sue. He seems to be, at least in the early episodes, an idealized version of the creators wish to be. He's smarter than everybody else. He's as good an athlete or better than most he's put up against, especially noted in the episode Eggheads, which we haven't gotten to yet, but I'll put up a card for it when we do. And in this world, he, quote, hit the mother load, unquote, as noted by Wing. So even though other people might be lucky, he's luckier. The things he's bad at are things the creators don't seem to care about. That is, social sciences, knowledge of other cultures, philosophy, music, arts, mysticism, anything occult, poetry, religious studies, and even certain forms of the natural sciences like biology biology and chemistry. He's just seemingly what they think of as an ideal person, although I do think some aspects of it are just merely incidental. As the series progresses, he does seem to get more human, though.
I think it's also worth mentioning that this is yet another world where not only can they remake the timer, but they have a lot more resources to do so. I was also going to say that this world, it's an interesting contrast to the last episode where they go to a USSR world where they have their own sort of form of wealth redistribution. So it's sort of like this idea from this hyper-communist world to this hyper-capitalist world. Though the fact that everyone is celebrating and not just landlords shows that this society can't be completely indifferent in regards to equity. Though it clearly is an unequal society, it's not like people who aren't homeowners aren't making some of the money, or at least it's implied to. Bennett is portrayed as living in an apartment. I actually don't know if Wang is.
Bennett. I don't think we actually see anything about where he lives.
Yeah, I just mean to say that it seems to be that the wealth is being distributed in a way, even people who don't own land, which in San Francisco is not many people own land, a lot of people have something to celebrate. So it's not completely capitalistic, but it's still a good contrast against the USSR.
Or the last world, anyway. So, Puerto Rico. What is your home like in this world?
So, Puerto Rico has generally had a bad track record for diversifying its energy portfolio. It's been particularly vulnerable to fluctuations in fuel prices. So, in a world where the US found a very large domestic oil source, this might actually be really good for Puerto Rico. In fact, if it's used well, which your mileage may vary on how much you trust Puerto Rico's government, this could avoid some of the financial difficulties that Puerto Rico faced in the aughts, particularly the 2006 Puerto Rican budget crisis. That being said, Puerto Rico has also been pretty stubborn about exploring alternate forms of energy despite their vulnerability in this regard, such as hydroelectric power, even though Puerto Rico has lots of rivers and such. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was a more secure oil source for Puerto Rico, or rather the United States, but that Puerto Rico would benefit from. Puerto Rico might be worse in the long term in this regard in terms of developing a more sustainable energy portfolio.
I guess that's it for this time. See you in the next world. Hennessy's, get over here! Nishinewe, Jai.
Jis.